I heard a big yes over there. So we're going to be studying Daniel. We're continuing this study all the way up to Easter. Just a quick reminder as to the structure of the book, as always. The structure of the book is 6 episodes or narratives that happen in the life of Daniel and the three amigos. And that's found in chapters 1 through 6. We will be doing the last of those narratives today. Before next week, we're going to go into a period of 4 visions. Those 4 visions that Daniel sees are located in chapters 7 through 12. So this is the last of the narratives today. And next week begins the first of 4 visions that we will look at together, okay? So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 6 today. Again, the last of these narratives or episodes. I know that Pastor Dan talked with y'all a little bit about the history of where we're at in Daniel's life and in the political situation at the time last week. Did he not? Yeah. Okay, so we've got a change. No longer are we talking about the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Does anyone know which empire we're talking about now? Who has conquered them? The Medes and the Persians. Now, sometimes if you look that up in like an encyclopedia or something, they'll give it a different name. They'll either call it the Medo-Persian Empire or they'll call it the Achaemenid dynasty, the Achaemenid Empire, okay? But Medo-Persian is maybe easier to say than Achaemenid. So here's the Medo-Persian Empire at its height. I don't know if y'all remember when we looked at the Neo-Babylonian Empire, it was modern-day Iraq extending into the Levant, like the fullness of the Levant, the so-called Fertile Crescent, which extends all the way through Palestine, there by the Mediterranean. You may notice that this empire has got some more land to it. For one, the Medes and the Persians are from what country today? What do we call that country today? It's not Iraq, it's Iran or Iran, however you want to say that. And so being from Iran, when they conquer Babylon in modern day Iraq, now all of a sudden you've doubled the size of your empire. But you notice that they not only extend into Palestine, so you've got Jerusalem there. Oh, just a second, y'all. I just remembered I don't even have the... Oh, wait. It's just up here. Start video. There we go. Sorry, that's for YouTube. I forgot that I didn't have it on it. Okay, so as you see, we've got much more land there. This empire eventually conquers Egypt, goes into what is today Libya up to Cyrene. You see that they extend east. If you're seeing that down in the bottom right-hand corner, what country is that? India. So this empire extends all the way to India, and it stops there because there's a lot of people living in that subcontinent. They're called Indians, and they don't take too kindly to invasion, even though they've had to put up with it several times historically. So this empire actually stops at the subcontinent, but it goes very far east, as you can see. They've also conquered some other place that you know in modern day history. What's that country up there around Lydia, Cilicia? Cilicia, that's bad on this map. Cilicia, some scholars think stayed pretty much autonomous, but whatever. They've conquered Lydia with Sardis, and eventually a city will be founded there called Byzantium. Where's that today? That's Turkey. That's modern day Turkey. Armenia, you ever heard of Armenians? Yeah. They've got them under their control. And then you notice that they go up into Macedonia, north of Greece. So if you know the famous story of the 300 Spartans and Thermopylae, anybody know that? So this is the Persian Empire that eventually attempts to conquer both Athens and Sparta. They fail. But it doesn't mean that they don't conquer other Greek-speaking peoples. So they do conquer up into Macedonia to the north of Greece. Everybody with me? So this empire is huge. This is not small. This is much larger than the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And they're the new game in town, and they roll in and conquer Babylon. And now Daniel and the three amigos will live out the rest of their life under the Persians rather than under the Babylonians. I mean, they still got plenty of Babylonian friends at work or whatever, you know what I mean? But they'll live technically under the Persians. Who's the big dog in town in chapter 6? Did y'all look at? Do you need a minute to look at it? Yeah. Okay, you need another minute to look at it. I'm gonna give you 5-10 minutes to look at it. Y'all go back and refresh your memory, and then we'll talk about it. And go. Okay, there you go. Thanks. Okay, not quite 5 minutes or something, but maybe enough time to kind of look over. It's just one chapter. I hear some good conversations going on already. Is there something that's standing out to anybody that you want to go ahead and shout out, or? Okay, what's up? Okay, so the question is, how old is Daniel at this point in history? He's an old man. So you know how I showed you at the beginning of the study a picture of Daniel in the lion's den, and he's an old man, and I said I shouldn't depict him as an old man? By the time he's thrown into the lion's den, he should be depicted as an old man. So now I have to take that back. He's a young guy when he's carted off to Babylon, but he's served basically an entire career at this point. He's an old guy, which makes it even worse. I mean, do you really throw an old guy into a lion's den? Come on, people. Be easy. You're going to break a hip or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's not nice. Don't do that to an old guy. But yeah, he's an old guy. I don't know, Sharon, if he's in his 60s or his 70s by this point, but he's up there. Okay. Hey, I didn't. All right, I'm just going to stop. Just saying. Okay. Anybody see a historical problem? I don't know if you see a historical problem yet with this text or not. Anybody see a historical problem with chapter 6? Who's the king? It's always king because that's the word in Hebrew, but like he's an emperor, right? We would call him an emperor in the Western tradition. Who's the emperor at the time? Darius. Anybody see a historical problem? There is no King Darius. So that should give you pause. There's no King Darius.
Is he like a governor?
He's not a governor. But I love where your brain went. He's not a governor. There's no King Darius. I mean, there is, but there isn't. If you look in an encyclopedia or a history book, who's going to be the guy who conquers Babylon and extends the borders of Persia? Anybody know the guy's name? No, not Darius, because he doesn't exist, Harlan. Cyrus the Great is the guy. Okay, Cyrus the Great is the guy. Okay, so that's who we're talking about in chapter 6. We're not talking about Darius, we're talking about Cyrus the Great. Darius doesn't exist to history. When I say to history, I mean other than the Bible, there is no reference that you can find outside the Bible to Darius. So we have to deal with this problem. What do people do with this problem? Some people, some people. Anyway, some people, sorry.
That's deep.
Yeah, that was a deep reference. I was reaching for that one. Some people who are considered historical critical scholars simply do not believe the Bible when it says something. So they believe that the Bible is a collection of myths, right? Everybody with me? And so they read it like you might read Beowulf or Gilgamesh or something like that. Everybody with me? So they say, well, the Bible's just wrong. Well, first of all, that's not cool because the Bible isn't wrong. And eventually, archaeology will bear it out. I'll give you an example. Last week, who was the last Babylonian emperor that you read about? Belshazzar. There was no Belshazzar until like the middle of the 20th century. We could not find an extra biblical reference to Belshazzar anywhere. So the historical critical scholars got together and said the Bible was wrong. They made up a king. There is no Belshazzar. And then we went on a little archaeological dig with Indiana Jones. Dun, 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 dun. And lo and behold, we found a reference to Belshazzar. So it just took us a while to dig it up. Everybody with me? So anyone who's out of hand says, well, the Bible's just mythology and the Bible's just wrong, should probably take a huge deep breath, because if you just give it enough time, there's still a lot of digging to be done. Okay. I believe personally we will eventually find a reference to Darius. Why? Because we have from Herodotus, who's a Greek historian, we know this about Cyrus. Cyrus is a Mede and he's a Persian. He's the child of a mixed marriage between Medes and Persians. They're not the same people. And I can't remember how it goes. I think it goes, his mama was a Mede and his daddy was a Persian. Okay. So there's a reason why politically this works. He's able to unite the Medes and the Persians, and then as a united group, take Babylon. The Medes were not strong enough to take Babylon. The Persians were not strong enough to take Babylon, but the Medes and the Persians together are strong enough to take Babylon. The reason that this works for him to take over the Babylonian Empire and then expand its borders is because Cyrus is both Mede and Persian at the same time. So everybody feels comfortable with him as the leader. Everybody with me? Okay. Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells us that he went by Cyrus on the throne, but that he had another name that his mama gave him that only his mama ever called him. And then Herodotus doesn't bother to tell you what the name was. So here's my humble opinion. I think his mama named him Darius. And Daniel, who clearly knows Cyrus personally, and we'll get to that as we go through chapter 6, the way Cyrus and Daniel talk to each other, you can tell they know each other personally. I think Daniel knows the name his mama gave him. And as someone who has one name that his mama gave him, but another name he has to go by in his professional life, because what's Daniel's name that his mama gave him? Daniel. What's the name he has to go by in his professional life? Belshazzar. Okay. Or if you go by the intentional misspelling, Belteshazzar, right? It's Belshazzar, just like that king's name. As someone who has a name that his mama gave him, but he has to go by another name professionally, if these two men knew each other like it looks like they did, I think maybe Daniel just sympathizes with the fact that your mama gave you a different name and keeps calling it Darius. Plus, everybody look in chapter 6 at the very end of the chapter there, verse 28. What's it say in verse 28? So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius. And then how many of you have the word and? And the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Here's the problem. I'm going to nerd out for a minute. That in Hebrew is just a single letter. The letter is called Vav. Everyone say Vav. And Vav can mean anything. It can mean and, it can mean but, it can mean or. It can also put two things in apposition. Okay. So in other words, one way to translate this would be, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian, or it could be translated this way, and this is just Hebrew grammar. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, that is the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Are y'all with me?
Are there any other versions of the Bible that don't have the word in?
Most of them do, but there are other places. So the question was, are there other versions of the Bible that don't have and? Most of them do, because it's sort of like an instant replay. It has to be overwhelming evidence before you can overturn the call. And the easiest translation for Vav is just the word and. However, there are other places in the Old Testament where Vav is translated, that is this other thing. Okay? So, take it or leave it. I'm not an exegete. I'm in a different department with my stuff, but I can read Hebrew. And so this is what I'm going to tell you. I'm taking this as, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, that is the reign of Cyrus the Persian, because I know from an extra biblical source, Herodotus, the Greek historian, that Cyrus had a name only his mama gave him, who was a Mede, and nobody called him by it. But it's clear from chapter 6 that Daniel and Cyrus knew each other personally. I think Daniel knew the guy's name that his mama gave him.
So
Darius is Cyrus.
Darius is Cyrus. Darius the strictly Mede name.
Yeah, that could be a Mede name, an ethnically Mede name. Cyrus is Persian. So he went by Cyrus on the throne. So Darius is Cyrus. They're not two different people. Because it would be a real problem if they were, since Darius doesn't exist to history. Are y'all with me? Okay. Darius is also trying to make a great society, like we said that the Babylonians were trying to make a great society. Cyrus, or Darius, has a different way of going about it. He's much more tolerant. But there's still stuff going on in this society. Just because okay. How many of y'all really got excited once because a new guy got elected president? You really thought your life was going to change. Okay. Okay. Me too. I've fallen in that trap a time or two in the past as well. Oh, everything's going to be better now. And then it's not. Okay. So new government rolls into town. Cyrus is the new guy. And he is more open-minded and tolerant of other people, their cultures, their beliefs, than the Babylonians ever were. So you might be tempted to think, well, now everything's going to be okay. But there's still an awful lot of stuff going on in this empire that are a direct affront to the worship of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because these are still pagan people. Are y'all with me? Yes, let's see a hand maybe. So Ezekiel and Daniel overlap each other. So the prophet Ezekiel. And then Jeremiah was back in Jerusalem, at least for part of the Neo-Babylonian period, but not by the time of the Persian period. So Jeremiah died before he saw the wall reconstructed by Nehemiah. Everybody with me? Okay. So what's going on in this empire that would still make a Jewish person's skin crawl? Well, something like this. On the left, that's a reconstruction of a portrait of Cyrus from a wall relief in the Medo-Persian Empire. Everybody with me? That's a reconstruction from a wall relief. It's a portrait of Cyrus. On the right, if you remember from a few weeks ago, is a wall relief of the Neo-Babylonian god Marduk. Anyone see some similarities here? Okay. So Cyrus has to rule over Babylonians. Babylonians have a pantheon of gods. One of the chief gods is Marduk. So how do they end up depicting Cyrus? Somewhat as Marduk. But Cyrus has a different religion. Cyrus is a Zoroastrian, which is hard for me to say, Zoroastrian. What is Zoroastrianism? It's an extremely ancient religion. It's at least 4,000 years old. And it pits good versus evil. So have y'all ever seen, like, in Chinese thought, the yin and the yang? Y'all ever see that? Taoism. It's kind of like yin and yang. There's a good and there's an evil, and they're pitted against each other in the cosmos and in world history. And Zoroastrians believe that eventually good will win. Okay? They have a principal deity called the Lord Wisdom, or the Lord of Wisdom, Ahura Mazda. And so technically, stay with me now, technically, they're monotheists. Now, why does that matter to our reading of Daniel? If y'all remember from, I don't know, Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 3, Daniel chapter 4, how does Nebuchadnezzar always refer to the God that Daniel worships? Go look at it if you need to. By the way, if you're wondering if there are still Zoroastrians around today, the answer is yes, there are Zoroastrians still around today, even though the Islamic coup in Iran tried to kill them all. But there are still Zoroastrians today, and it was up until the takeover by the Muslim clerics in Iran a major religion in the country of Iran, even to this day. How does Nebuchadnezzar keep referring to the God that Daniel prays to? So he calls him the God of gods, right, and the God of kings. So he keeps referring to him by one of the names that he would have heard the Hebrews speaking of him as, El Elyon. Have you ever heard that name, El Elyon? That's one name that he would have heard the Hebrews, the Judeans, I should say, because they're no longer referred to as Hebrews. He would have heard Daniel and the three amigos refer to their God as El Elyon, the Most High God. But he keeps referring, if you notice in the text, Nebuchadnezzar keeps referring to the God of Daniel as his God, this God amongst gods, the God you pray to. Y'all with me? Now look in chapter 6, along about verse 20. Chapter 6, along about verse 20. What does it say? The living God. Cyrus is the only one to refer to the God that Daniel prays to as the living God. And he refers to him that way in his decree. Look over at verse 26. Everybody looking at verse 26? Cyrus says, I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. It's almost prophecy all of a sudden. There is no indication that Cyrus, in the way we would think about it, converted away from Zoroastrianism to become a Jewish proselyte. Are y'all with me? And yet, there may be some textual evidence here that suggests that Cyrus is conflating the God that Daniel keeps talking to him about as the Lord Wisdom who created the cosmos in his own system. Are y'all with me? So he may be the theological word is syncretism. He may be conflating the two systems together. Another group that does this constantly would be when you speak with Hindus. Anybody ever talk to a Hindu? You talk to them about your God, and they're like, sure, yeah, we can fit that in right here. You know what I mean? Like, they just sort of, there's a place for that. I don't know for certain because I don't know Cyrus. He's dead now, and we've never gone bowling together. Okay. Never had a beer with the guy. Don't know. But from the text, it seems to me that because he refers to this God that Daniel prays to so differently than the way that Nebuchadnezzar always refers to him. The way Nebuchadnezzar refers to the God that Daniel prays to sounds like the way Romans refer to this God, sounds like the way that Greeks refer to this God. Any pagan society that has a pantheon of gods, they go, this is one more God. Cyrus seems to be conflating, as a Zoroastrian, the God that Daniel's praying to the deity that he knows, because he's also a monotheist. Everybody with me? So what he may be doing, and I don't know this for a fact, but what he may be doing is what some Americans do when they say, well, Christians and Muslims pray to the same God. You just call him God and they call him Allah. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? So he may be running them together. Did I see the hand in the back?
With the other contrast, Nebuchadnezzar recognized God's power after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of amazed that this guy states that God can do something before it happens. You say to Daniel, your God can protect you.
Your God can deliver you, yeah. Because again, as a Zoroastrian, he believes that the world is divided up between good and evil. And he believes that good will win. And he believes in one deity. So there's a bridge that can be built between Daniel's religion and Cyrus's. They are not the same religion and they are not the same system. But there is a bridge that can be built that is not the same bridge that has to be built between a pagan polytheistic society and Judean religion and culture and society. Are y'all with me? Yeah.
Would Cyrus have one of those bumper stickers that says coexist on the back of his chariot?
So the question was, would Cyrus have one of those bumper stickers that say coexist on the back of his chariot? Most certainly, because Cyrus has to be the emperor of people all the way to the Indus River, all the way to Greece. So we talk about somebody like Alexander the Great. But before there was Alexander the Great, there was Cyrus the Great. And this guy rules over a bunch of different peoples with a bunch of different belief systems. So publicly, but also privately, he definitely would have a coexist sticker on the back of his chariot, because that's how everybody's going to get along. But technically, he does have a religion. It's a very ancient religion. It's been around a long time, like a system like Hinduism or Buddhism. It's a very old religion. It's not Johnny come lately. Zoroastrian is a real thing. It's an established religion, and Cyrus is a Zoroastrian. Okay. And yeah, Rick, you're right. He seems to believe on the front end that the God Daniel is praying to is the God that he somehow knows too. He's running them together, but he knows that this God can protect Daniel on the front end. Cyrus is also the guy that allows the Jews to return to Jerusalem and allows Nehemiah to start rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So there is a very Jewish term applied to Cyrus. Anybody know what the Jews call Cyrus? They call him Mashiach. What word is that to you? Messiah. Now, they don't mean Messiah like the ultimate Messiah that they know God is going to send to save the world. They don't mean that Messiah. But at this time in history, the Jews do refer to Cyrus as Mashiach. They refer to him as the Messiah because he saved the Jews from exile and allowed the walls of and the city of Jerusalem to be rebuilt and put royal money behind it. So this guy is a really open-minded cat. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go well, or there aren't things, like I said, if we go back to that one, there aren't, aspects to this Persian society that don't make a Jewish person's skin crawl. Okay. But it is definitely a new day for these Jewish people. Okay. Everybody with me? So then what's the deal with the lion's den? If it's a new day and this guy's so open-minded, and if he's a syncretist, if he's conflating his idea of Ahura Mazda with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then what is going on with this lion's den? How does this even happen? Oh, and by the way, y'all remember at the beginning of this study, I told you they shouldn't depict Daniel as an old guy? Because I made a big deal out of how when the Babylonians conquered, he was like 18, 17, 18. Well, now at the lion's den, he is an old guy. So there you go. So it's okay. I just didn't want you to think him as an old guy until we got to this part. That's why I made a big deal out of it. I wanted you to think of him as a 17, 18-year-old when it started, because he was. But he's served a long and decorated career in public service, and now he's being turned on. What's going on? If Cyrus is this open-minded cat, and if they know each other, how do we know that they knew each other? What in the text would make us think that these guys knew each other on a personal level? He lost sleep, but before that even, what does it say that he did?
Give him every opportunity to.
Now, he tried to find a legal loophole. Why would he bother to find a legal loophole? Are there not other satraps he could put in charge of a district? There are. You don't think a guy like Cyrus, who's very worldly and very political, doesn't replace people every day? Why is he struggling so hard? They know each other on a personal level. This is bothering him. So if he's so open-minded, why does this even happen? What's it say in the text?
He set up the law. And it was
Well, wait a minute. Why did he set up the law?
he was tricked into it, I guess.
Who came to it? The other satraps. Why do the other satraps come to Cyrus? They want to get rid of Daniel. Why do they want to get rid of Daniel?
Jealousy, too much power.
Yeah, jealousy, too much power, all that stuff. Y'all, he has served in public service now under 2 empires, several different emperors, and that's a lot of water under the bridge. And he's not going anywhere.
You're saying he's a career politician?
I am saying he's a career politician. I am exactly saying he's a career politician. He's a career bureaucrat. He's actually the kind of guy I don't particularly like most times that I meet them, right? And yet here he is, right? Just goes to show in the body of Christ, you too can be saved. Okay, there you go. But think about what you know of politics. If somebody's been a fixture for that long, is there always somebody who wants them removed and wants their spot?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is not hard to wrap our heads around, right? These other satraps devise a plan to remove Daniel, who's advanced in years at this point. And so they get the emperor to sign a decree. Now, this is really beautiful historically, by the way. This is really beautiful. Where is it? Let me show this to you. Verse 14. Verse 14 through and 15. Everybody there? Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. He's looking for a legal loophole, showing that he knew him personally. Verse 15, then these men came by agreement to the king, by agreement. Y'all catching that? This is et tu, Brute stuff. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed, not even by the king himself. That's such a beautiful historical detail, because if you go to an encyclopedia and you read about the Medo-Persian Empire, it expanded to this huge extent, but in order to effectively administrate it, they had these unchangeable, unwavering, unbreaking. I mean, think about like Sherman from Germany. Say our rules and procedures. Okay. They had this view of government that if it's a rule, it's a rule. Everybody with me? If it's a procedure, if it's a procedure. If it's a policy, it's a policy. And this system of government of theirs stagnated and crystallized and hardened into this bureaucracy that could not move to the point to where eventually they were fragile and they fell. That's the kind of empire that Alexander the Great encountered when he conquered them. They were no longer nimble and they couldn't move fast enough. Everybody with me? So I love this historical detail that already in the early days, they say it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance of the king can be changed, not even by the king. You're stuck. How do y'all like that little historical detail? And that's so culturally relevant for the Medo-Persian Empire. It's beautiful. Yeah.
I understand Darius, people came to Darius and complained that, well, lions didn't eat him because you fed him real well right before.
Yeah.
And so he decided to take these people who complained and put them in the lion's den, and history said the lions tore them to pieces.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The lions tore the guys who were aligned and their families, by the way, threw everybody in there, including the kids. And you know, the kids are like, where are we going, Daddy? We're going to the zoo. And right before those kids died, they turned to their dad and went, you lied about the dog too, didn't you? You didn't send him to a farm, you know? Anyway. Yeah. The brutal nature of life sometimes and the things you have to tell your kids. I feel sorry for the kids. They didn't do anything, right? Reading the Bible with Pastor Will. What's wrong with him? So many things, if you only knew. You don't want to know. But that's what it's like reading the Bible in my head. So Daniel, once again, God has defended Daniel. And once again, God has shown that he is still God over his people, who defends and fights for his people, even if they are in exile. They are only in exile because the Lord has commanded it, allowed it, however you want to put it. But he will shepherd his people, whether they are far from home or whether they are back in Jerusalem. And a time is coming, speaking of this pluralistic empire, a time is coming where it won't be about whether or not you are ethnically Jewish. It will be about whether or not you have faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Questions, problems, comments? Next week, yes.
Bible here that there was another way that Eric or Cyrus knew Daniel, and he said, he didn't just throw him in the lion's pit, he said, may the God that he served save him.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's stuck. There's nothing he can do. Next week, we will not be looking at a narrative section. We will be looking at a vision. So if you look ahead to chapter 7, you'll notice that we're getting into some chapters where there's some more versification. So these are visions. This is prophetic stuff. Are y'all seeing this? So spend some time with it this week, because if it's poetic, if there's imagery, if there's symbolic language, sometimes we have to slow down a little bit. So give yourself, a few minutes this week, look at it, and we'll start with the visions that God gave to Daniel next week in chapter 7, okay? I love you, Jesus loves you.
Bye.